What's up everyone? So in today's video I want to go over the pros and cons that I have found using the AZERON keypad after using it for about 5 months. The reason I want to make this video is because I want to help you guys decide if you want to buy this keypad or not. So the first half of this video will be going over the pros that I have found using this keypad, and then the second half of the video will be the cons. At the end of this video I'll let you guys know if I recommend switching to this keypad or not, but if you guys just look at all the pros and cons, you can decide yourself. And if I think of any more pros or cons, I will make sure to put them in the comments below. Or if anyone else has anything that I didn't think about, please let me know in the comments if you are using this keypad so that I can help other people who want to switch over and they can decide for themselves if it's worth it or not. So the biggest pro is obviously that you can put all your movement binds on your thumb using the analog stick. So it frees up your other fingers to press other buttons that they can rest on without having to worry about WASD. So right now I have my pointer finger resting on edit, so I don't have to move it off to edit stuff. I have my middle finger as jump. I have my ring finger as wall, and then I have my pinky as cone. But pinky doesn't really matter because it's always on cone or crouch or whatever. So it frees up those three fingers to do normal things and not having to move your fingers around as much to press all the different buttons that you need to press because you have your movement binds on your analog stick. The next biggest pro is that it's highly customizable. Let me pull up the AZERON gaming software. Now that I have the AZERON software pulled up, you can see that each of the buttons on the AZERON keypad is very customizable. If you want to change any of these buttons, you just click on the setting thing, the button, then you can just click whatever button you want and then it'll change over to that button. It's very helpful in adjusting your keybinds and figuring out which keybinds you like. Another benefit of being able to change these buttons is that you don't have to change them in your FORTNITE settings. And so if you want to switch back over to keyboard at some point, you don't have to keep switching back and forth between the two. You can just change the buttons in the AZERON software. So another thing that's very customizable is the analog stick. You can change the angle of where you want the different buttons to be. So for example, if you want W to be straight up, if you move your thumb straight up, you can change the angle. But if you want W to be straight out or forward, you can change the angle to whatever you want. You can change the dead zone to whatever you want. So it's pretty helpful, pretty nice. So the next advantage I want to talk about is that it takes up very little desk space. Now that I have my camera pulled up, you can see that it takes up almost no space at all. So I have plenty of movement with my mouse. Another huge advantage is that there's less chance of doing misclicks on the keyboard. I always hit Q instead of 1, or I'd always hit E instead of 3 or 4. So I'd always misclick the buttons that I want to press, but when you're on the AZERON keypad, you don't have to worry about doing that as much because there's only 3 buttons for each finger, and you can only move your finger one way to click those buttons. You don't accidentally press another button. Another big advantage is that you have less finger movement when you're pressing different buttons. Go and watch any pro with a hand cam on their keyboard. Their fingers are moving 100 miles an hour all the time to do simple plays. But with this keypad, don't have to worry about moving your fingers all over the place all the time because they're just small movements away. Since it's highly customizable, you can have different fingers press different buttons than you normally could, so you don't have to worry about hand fatigue as much, and you have less finger movement, which is very nice. Another advantage is that it's very adjustable for all hand sizes. Let me pull my camera back up. So now that I have the camera up, you can see that there's, if this will focus, you can see that there's different screws for each finger, and so that allows you to adjust each finger to whatever position you want it to be for the most comfortable setup for what you like. I'm not going to move them at all because I already have them set up to the way I like, and it took a while to get that way. So the final pro I want to talk about is that it spreads out the buttons for your fingers so that you don't have to press a bunch of buttons with one finger. So if you look at different players, they press E, R, D, F, C, X, 3, 4 with their pointer fingers. So that's 5 to 8 buttons with just your pointer finger, whereas with this keypad, the most you can press with one finger is 3, with the exception of your pointer finger, that's 4. But they're such small movements that it really doesn't feel like you're pressing as many buttons as you would normally would with a regular keyboard. So now that I've mentioned all the things I like about this keypad, let's move over to the things I don't like about this keypad. The number one issue, and if you watch anyone who uses this keypad, they'll mention this, the biggest issue is 360-degree movement is broken as of July 8th. If you go into Fortnite settings and you turn on lock input method as mouse, it does not work. If you want to learn more about this, go to Beaks' channel, and he has a video up about why this is an issue and why you cannot use 360-degree movement anymore, which is very annoying. I hope Epic fixes this, but it's been broken since April, and we have no way of knowing when it will get fixed or if it will get fixed at all. So the next issue I have with this keypad is that the analog stick is very large and requires a lot of movement to move your player around. So if I were to hold this keypad up, you can see as I move this analog stick around, it has a very wide range of motion. So it's very hard to do fine movements because you have to move your thumb a lot, which is very annoying. So if I were to compare that to a regular controller, this analog stick movement is so much less than when I'm using this. So if you're expecting an analog stick that's like a PlayStation, it's similar, but it's not exactly the same, and it'll take a while to get used to it. So the next issue I have is that it's pretty hard to press these top 4 buttons. If you're in a build fight and you need to press, wall, cone, floor, edit, you need to press a bunch of buttons at once, it's hard to lift your fingers up and press just one of these buttons without lifting the rest of your fingers off the buttons that they need to press. So to fix that, I would just recommend that you use ping or something for these buttons, which is just things that you don't necessarily need to use while in a big battle, so that in case you have to lift your fingers up to press them, you won't have an issue messing up the rest of your fingers. Another issue I've run across while using this keypad is that it's hard to switch between games. So if you're only playing Fortnite, it's really nice, but if you're trying to switch to CSGO or Valorant or COD, then you have to memorize what each button does for each game, which can be very difficult at times. And for a lot of other games, I just use a keyboard because I don't need to press as many buttons at one time. So switching between a keyboard and this keypad can be difficult at times because you're so used to jumping with your pointer finger while playing Fortnite, but when you switch over to Valorant and you press space to jump, I sometimes mess that up and it causes me to die or causes me to not do what I wanted to do. So that's just something to keep in mind before you buy this keypad. So the last 2 issues I have with this keypad are when you first start using the keypad for the first time. The first one is that there's no indications on the buttons, so you have to memorize what each button does faster if you want to be able to do anything while playing Fortnite. When you're playing keyboard for the first time, you can sometimes glance down at your fingers to make sure you're pressing the right buttons and make sure your hand's in the right location. But when you use this keypad, there's no button indication, so you just have to memorize what they do flat out in order to do anything. So the last thing I kind of mentioned before, it's awkward to change between the keyboard and this keypad. So the biggest example is that I use my middle finger for jump with this keypad, but on the keyboard I use my thumb to jump. Another thing is I use WASD to move on the keyboard, but on this keypad you just use your thumb. So those are things to think about, is that if you want to switch between keyboard and this keypad for whatever reason while playing Fortnite, it's going to take a couple of games or a couple of days to be able to make the switch and memorize what each finger does without having a lot of issues. So that's all the pros and cons I have for this keypad. I'll make sure at the end of this video to put a list of all the pros and cons I talked about so that you guys can make a decision for yourself if you want to buy this keypad or not. I guess one thing I didn't mention before is that this keypad is pretty expensive. I think I paid between $160 to $180 for it. So that's something else you have to keep in mind before you buy this keypad to make sure it's worth it for you. The question still remains if I would recommend this keypad or not. The answer to that is yes, I would recommend it. I personally think all the pros I talked about outweigh the cons. In terms of switching from controller to this keypad, I would recommend it. I think it's easier. I played on controller for 2.5 years and I tried switching over to keyboard. I played on keyboard for a couple of months and I just couldn't get used to it, so I switched back over to controller, and ever since I switched from controller to this keypad, I have not switched back because I actually really enjoy using it. In terms of switching from keyboard to this keypad, I would still recommend it because it's a lot easier to use. Once you get used to it, you don't do as many misclicks. It's a lot more comfortable for your hand. And finally, you don't have to worry about pressing as many buttons with just a couple of fingers. You can spread them out over your whole hand, which is really nice, and I really like it. So that's all I had for this video. If you have any questions about the keypad, make sure to leave them down in the comments below. I want to help you guys out in any way I can if you're thinking about buying this keypad. So again, any question you have, please let me know, because there's no such thing as a dumb question about this keypad. well, okay, maybe there is a dumb question, so please don't ask me dumb questions, but, you know, any logical question you can ask me and I will not hesitate to answer it. So that's all I had for this video. If this video helped you out, make sure you leave a like down below. It really helps me out. I'm uploading one video a week, so if you want to see more of me using this keypad, make sure to subscribe, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day.